This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. A cattle market and industry update from University of Nebraska at Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis begins today's show. He discusses the markets, policies, labor, dairy, and technology. Keeping the show rolling is Jeremie, Kouame, and Anita Dille as they explain site-specific weed management and what it can mean for weed control and cost savings. Lexie Hayes, K-State Extension Assistant and Youth Livestock Program Coordinator, ends the show previewing the K-State Junior Beef Producer Day. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show discussing the cattle market and what's been happening in the cattle industry with University of Nebraska at Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis. Elliott, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Elliott, what are we currently seeing when we look at the processing capacity and how that's impacted the market?
Yeah, when we think about kind of where we're at on kind of processing capacity, obviously a lot of discussion has been centered around kind of the loss of the 5,000 head from Tyson here in Lexington. But over these last over the next several years, we have capacity that has come online or that will be online. For instance, we have kind of the AFG plant, American Food Group's plant in Missouri that is currently processing 100% of cows and bulls, but in 2027, they kind of aim to, change to about 50-50 with cows and fed cattle. Another plant that will be kind of come online in 2028 is the Producer's Own cattle down in Amarillo, Texas. That's aim to be about 3,000 head per day plant. And then, of course, we have the sustainable beef, which is, harvesting somewhere in that 1,200 head range. So when we think about kind of the loss of capacity that we've had, but also this kind of new capacity for fed cattle, that's coming on, amongst the other things like the agri-beef plants that have come online in kind of the western part of the U.S. There is quite a bit of capacity being developed out there. So there was a lot of discussion about that, and I think that definitely has strong implications for kind of where the markets can go.
You were recently at CattleCon, and you mentioned about a few different things that were talked about, and one of them being policies. And what did you hear about that?
Yeah, so the big policy that was kind of brought forward, resolution, was to look at a breeding cow LRP policy. So to really kind of encouraging USDA to form a working group to try to develop a breeding and cull cow LRP product that's really kind of supports the larger industry as we start to rebuild the herd, and a lot of concern out there that the coverage may not be adequate, especially with kind of higher value animals. That ended up being passed at NCBA, so look for something like that to at least have a discussion being started with the USDA. Two other interesting proposals that were kind of introduced was the CME live cattle delivery, kind of increasing delivery points as kind of a way to basically increase arbitrage or convergence between the futures and kind of the cash market. That ended up being kind of withdrawn. And the other kind of larger discussion was about LMR confidentiality criteria, which essentially currently right now it only focuses on negotiated cash. And so obviously there's been discussion over this last fall with the Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico region not reporting for several weeks, and that largely had to do with just kind of this negotiated cash. And so there was a proposal out there to try to apply confidentiality criteria to basically this basket of negotiated cash and negotiated grid transactions. And really what they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to post a price, but really advocating for changing some of this confidentiality criteria. That ended up being withdrawn as well, but those are kind of the two things that are kind of on people's mind: convergence in the cash market, and also, what do we do with kind of price discovery and making sure we're having adequate pricing for across all the regions.
And we know policy can make changes when we look at the industry, and something else happening in industry that's making some impacts: labor disputes and what's happening with labor.
Yeah, that was a kind of the big announcement this week on Thursday. JBS, which is about 99% unionized, decided to go on a strike. There was a lot of angst about what this would look like. They've been negotiating for several months, and those have kind of failed for various reasons. And so a lot of kind of worry out there what that could look like if they decide to ultimately kind of close the plant due to kind of the labor strike. I think our most recent kind of version of this was when the Tyson Amarillo plant had a labor dispute this past June. And ultimately, it took them about a month to resolve that. Once they kind of voted that they were going to strike, kind of brought Tyson back to the table. Tyson ended up giving them most things that they wanted. And so I don't want to speculate too much, but it seems like it's kind of similar following suit. We'll have to see kind of how JBS kind of plays that with the labor demands there, and also kind of what that would mean for kind of closing a plant like that in Greeley, Colorado.
And wanting to focus back towards the market, something that's been important, beef on dairy cattle, and has there been some new technology that's looked into carcass sizes?
Yeah, so beef on dairy has obviously been growing a lot more popular. There was several presentations on kind of what the beef on dairy market looks like, some from the geneticists and just kind of semen sales out there. And really, when you look at kind of the growth in semen sales, really was pretty flat from about 2014 to 2019. And then since then, it's just kind of ramped up exponentially. Obviously, we know there's a lot of sex semen out there. And then but beef on dairy has become a huge kind of role. There's not new animals coming into the market. It's just that those animals are becoming higher value. We've always kind of fed, dairy steers, but now that we've crossed them, we're actually able to provide kind of higher value kind of meat products. And that's really kind of showed up. Cargill showed some really good grading data and what beef on dairy kind of grades. And what you kind of notice is that they tend to grade a lot higher percentage of prime. And that percentage prime has really grown in kind of the upper 2/3 percentage. And so a lot of interest out there. Now, the kind of concern is that there still is variability in the carcass size and kind of where they deposit meat. And so new technology that's kind of being evaluated, and this is kind of a part of a larger discussion that's been happening in the beef industry about readjusting or reevaluating what the yield grade equation is when we determine what yield grade should be actually examined. This beef on dairy is definitely complicating, that discussion as well. But I was really amazed at some of the technology that even they're using where they can actually look at the entire carcass and essentially try to quantify how much cutability is within each primal by carcass, and whether there's a discussion about should you pay depending upon how large each primal is. So a lot of action there. I think beef on dairy is an exciting, and some of the work that I've done that's kind of really shown about the price weight slides of dairy steers and what that looks like for just like a beef Holstein cross versus a beef composite cross versus like a beef Jersey cross, and kind of what that looks like across different weights and pricing. And it's really quite interesting. And definitely the day old dairy steer market is really strong right now.
Also at CattleCon, there was the opportunity to hear more about the food pyramid. And what did you learn?
Yeah, so this is something that NCBA has been pushing for quite a few years, and it's kind of ultimately culminated in this new food pyramid that's come out. I think RFK Jr. has really kind of pushed it and really kind of highlighted protein. We had the opportunity to listen to RFK Jr. He kind of made a surprise visit down in Nashville and talked to the group there and really kind of explained a lot of the process and how they came up with a food pyramid, and really kind of the position of just trying to eat whole foods that are nutrient rich. And the more that we can provide, protein in that diet, it can really help people's lives. And so he was very positive on the beef industry. Of course, he wants us to, continue to grow the market and, increase the number of animals that are out there for just obvious reasons. But, it was from the government side, just really positive about kind of what the industry is doing, and just the fact that the important role that protein in general plays in a person's diet, and beef being a key cornerstone in that.
And at the CattleCon trade show, was there anything you were consistently seeing throughout?
Yeah, so there's obviously with LRP subsidies being increased, there's a lot of people or companies really selling just different federally subsidized insurance products. That's been something that's pretty consistent over the last several years. But kind of the new thing that I saw a big push towards was a lot of these cattle technology companies. And we've had kind of database management companies for a long time along the supply chain. But really, AI was obviously the big buzzword, artificial intelligence, and trying to use, value added propositions throughout the entire supply chain. And that's what I was kind of, really kind of taken back on, was just a lot of companies trying to incorporate AI into these databases and really trying to, forward and backward integrate, the data process so that you, as a producer, no matter where you're at, can make an informed decision along the supply chain. The reason why I like that, because it just kind of focuses on, the need for data. I think a lot of times we've been focusing on, it's data entry and all that stuff. AI can help kind of speed that up, the data entry and kind of database management. But we still need to be collecting that data because it's hard, those models and the way that they work, they require data. And so just kind of really this kind of return to, focus on data and trying to capture it and manage it. And then make informed decisions about it was just something that I just saw quite a few companies, regardless if they were a technology only company or they were just in, breeding companies, selling semen. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting and kind of see where the industry is kind of moving towards, just trying to make and use data to make informed decisions.
Elliott, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was University of Nebraska at Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing site-specific weed management and targeted sprayers with K-State weed scientist Jeremie Kouame and K-State weed ecologist Anita Dille. Jeremie, Anita, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
This will be great.
Anita, first, can you just define for us what is site-specific weed management?
Site-specific weed management is our opportunity to go into a field and manage weeds where they are. We have, for so many years, based on our technologies, only been able to control weeds on a whole field basis, but we know that they are potentially patchy or only occurring in certain places. And we have the opportunity to just control them where they are and not necessarily needing to do things in other parts of the field where we don't have those weeds. Lots of different tools, lots of different ways that we can go after weeds, and we can put them in the right place and where the weeds are.
When we're looking at fallow fields, what are some of those different tools that producers could use?
Again, in fallow settings, we have different technologies that are available to growers. Some of those technologies will use, for example, light reflectance. Others will use chlorophyll fluorescence, but the newer versions will use machine vision and AI. Talking about the reflected lights, we know that there are spectral differences between the light which is reflected by dead materials and also plants. And so some technologies like Weed Seeker will use a variation in spectral reflectance to detect plants from other backgrounds. Once the weed is detected, though, a solenoid-controlled spraying nozzle is going to be activated and treat only where the weed is present. But then when it comes to fluorescence, when the light is absorbed, we know chlorophyll has what we call generally a ground state, at its lowest energy. And at this energy, it's going to absorb, right, some photon of light and gets excited. But the thing is, at this excited state, it's very unstable. And so it's going to have about 4 ways to release the energy. First of all, it's going to give some energy to the surroundings as a heat. Another way is to transfer some of the energy to another molecule. Other way is going to be to use some of the energy for what is called photochemistry. And photosynthesis is one of these chemical reactions. And lastly, it can remit a photon of light with a process known as chlorophyll fluorescence. Chlorophyll fluorescence has been used to study, the physiology of plants in many ways to understand stress. But another way it is used, though, is with technology, right, to detect the fluorescence and target weeds. And a technology that uses chlorophyll fluorescence is what we call weedit. So that's another way it is used. And lastly, we have machine vision, right, and AI, which is used in the more recent John Deere See and Spray Select, where we have cameras and sensors mounted on the boom that continuously take some images of the ground and then spray those areas where the weeds are detected.
Are there things that can be adjusted that might affect the application accuracy?
Sure. In the setup of the cameras and the ability to detect, say, in the fallow field, we're thinking that it's green on brown. So we have a brown background, or as Jeremie described, it's sort of the non-plant background, and you're looking for the green. We call those sensitivities or thresholds, detection ability that can be adjusted to the amount of green area that should be seen by the camera to then say, okay, I have enough green area in this area of the camera to trigger a nozzle. Detection thresholds or a sensitivity of the sprayer is based on the area or the size of the weed that you can detect. If I set it up to be a very small threshold that's very sensitive, this would mean that a very small area would trigger the spraying, and that would happen more often. If I had a larger threshold, that would reduce the sensitivity because I need more green area detected to feel confident that I have seen a weed, but that may then result in less applications, and thereby I might reduce the total herbicide that I would use. So that latter one would be described more as a savings threshold. Growers might be very interested in reducing their herbicide use as much as possible, so they want to make sure that their sensitivity is set at this sort of larger threshold level. If they want to make sure that they're hitting all the weeds, they want an efficacy, they may end up spraying a little more, but they feel a little more confident that they detected smaller areas, for sure got the weeds and didn't miss anything. So those are the range of things. There's no magic number. They could be set, at various levels across these different systems, but that's sort of the idea behind it, is that you can adjust based on a person's risk or their desire or how many more times they might go across that field to see weeds as they keep growing.
How does this differ from someone who's spraying in a fallow field to someone who is spraying in a field with their crops coming up?
In the fallow field, we don't have any crops, so it's just the weed we detect. But in the crop, we gotta be able to detect the weed instead of the crop itself to trigger the nozzle. And that comes to what Anita was explaining. So we, let's say the algorithm can detect the weed correctly or not in the crop. So for example, let's suppose we want to spray Palmer pigweed in grain sorghum. And so if Palmer is present and then the machine detects Palmer and triggers the sprayer to spray it, that's what we typically call a true positive, right? But then if Palmer is not present, but then the machine classifies a grain sorghum crop as Palmer and sprays it, that becomes a false positive. And that's still in crop. Next, if Palmer is present, but then the machine is classifying this not as a Palmer, it's not going to spray it, right? And this becomes a false negative. The consequence of that is the weed is present, but is not sprayed, which is an issue. And lastly, if the weed is not there and is not sprayed, we will consider this as a true negative. So the difference between the fallow settings and the in-crop, I would say it's more challenging, to differentiate the weed from the crop in-crop season compared to fallow settings, I would say.
And to add to that, that is sort of the ultimate goal that we want with these application tools, is that I can tell it's the weed and what specific species it is and separate it from the crop. Prior to getting to that sophisticated level, we have looked at tools that would do what we call row removal. And so basically with smaller crops, they sort of mask the area that the camera is going to see where the row is, so my soybean row or my corn row, and I'm just looking between and looking for anything green that shouldn't be between the rows. So in our soybean and corn systems, even in grain sorghum, cotton, for example, we know we plant these in rows. We can tell where the rows should be, and then we're looking with those cameras to the spaces between the rows, and then we're back to the idea of a fallow field. I'm looking at that green on brown kind of situation. And so when I see green between the rows, those should be weeds, and I will then trigger my sprayer to go there. So we're everywhere from sort of that level up to that very sophisticated machine learning, camera vision, artificial intelligence, where I've taught my sprayer, hey, this is the weed, this is the crop, spray one, not the other. The other challenge with this, or the ability that we have, is a lot of our crops have herbicide resistant traits. And so that allows us to safely spray weeds in those crops without hurting the crop. So we need to be selective in the products that we actually use to protect our crop and still go after the weeds. And so that's another component of just what do you actually spray with as you're out in the field going after them. As Jeremie's scenario comes with grain sorghum, we don't have near as many of those herbicide resistant traits. And so a few more challenges in putting the system, these kind of targeted spraying systems in that crop compared to what we've been able to do in corn and soybeans so far.
What crops is this technology being able to be used in?
As for now, the technology is available for corn, soybean, and cotton.
Anita, from your work in this, do you see a reduction in herbicide use?
My team here in Manhattan had the chance to work with the One Smart sprayer system, which is from BASF Bosch. And that particular system, we evaluated it on experiments over 3 years where we were looking at a variety of programs. So we did compare, what if I did a regular broadcast application, how much product did we actually use, compared to some different scenarios where we were using the targeted sprayer application and the different threshold levels. Clearly, we could reduce the product amount that we needed to spray when we were just targeting the weeds. But our challenge is the key weed that drives a lot of our management decisions is Palmer amaranth or water hemp, these pigweed species, and there are always lots and lots and lots of them in the field. And so we have to get the weed population in the field low enough through other tools. So we were looking at a lot of residual herbicide programs that you would still put down as a foundation to manage those weeds. But then the ones that, either came up through that particular herbicide or emerged later, we were able to then use the targeted application to just go after those weeds and not spray those empty areas where there weren't any. And so we could clearly see that there was savings and still get good weed control in the fields because we were able to hit those weeds.
That was K-State weed ecologist Anita Dille and K-State weed scientist Jeremie Kouame. I will link to Agronomy e-update articles on this topic in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show talking about the K-State Junior Beef Producer Day with K-State Extension Assistant and Youth Livestock Program Coordinator, Lexie Hayes. Lexie, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Shelby.
Lexie, what is the K-State Junior Beef Producer Day?
It is a one-day educational opportunity for youth and their families to come learn about their beef project, from selection to nutrition to some meat science, and also the showmanship portion of that project.
And learning about those different subjects, who usually helps with the teaching part of it?
Usually we have a guest speaker, and actually this year it will be Brady Jensen, who will be doing the selection and showmanship portion. And then we have other faculty and staff. And then we also have the judging team involved. They usually help with the hair care and grooming and some of the other topics we're going to be offering this year. So we have a variety of both experts outside of our department, as well as a lot of internal people that are faculty, staff, students affiliated with K-State Animal Sciences that help make sure that it's a great day and it's a fun day of learning for our families.
How do you see this as being beneficial for people who attend?
It's a great opportunity just for them to learn about their project. We're usually able to hit the spectrum of experience. So any age and skill level is invited to attend. The beginning families especially find it helpful as they're just getting started in their beef project. But also we have experienced families that their kids are seniors in high school and they've been coming since their first year in the project. And everyone can take away something from this program.
Lexie, what is your favorite part of the day?
My favorite part of the day is just watching the families engage with the speakers and how engaged they are and interested in truly learning. There's no competitive part to this day. It is all about being excited and learning about your project. And it's always fun, especially those beginners, to see them hit the door and see all the purple. And usually they're really excited that they're here at K-State. They're seeing real K-State students and a real K-State vet. And so that's the really exciting part, is to see their excitement. And for some of them, it's their first experience with K-State. And so we like that part as well, that we're welcoming them into the K-State family.
And this is the Junior Beef Producer Day, but are people beyond youth welcome to attend?
Yes, absolutely. We have a lot of parents who come with their kids. And then also we have a lot of extension agents, ag teachers, project leaders who come and see what they can share with their kids who maybe weren't able to attend as well.
What is registration for this day?
Well, the actual event is happening on March 7th, first Saturday in March, but the registration is due on February 13th. That's when the registration is $20 a person. And also you have to register by the 13th to be able to get an event t-shirt.
And if people are registering after the 13th, what is cost then?
The cost is $30 if you register after the fact, and anyone who registers after the deadline won't get a t-shirt, unfortunately.
And one thing that's happening with the Junior Beef Producer Day, maybe not a part of the programming, but can take place afterwards, YQCA training. And if someone's interested in that, how do they go about making sure they get that done?
We offer an optional instructor-led Youth for the Quality Care of Animals, or YQCA training, at the end of the day. And so it's just an additional component. Since families are there, we offer it as a chance for them to go ahead and get their quality assurance training done. During the registration process online, I ask if you're interested. And families who are, we will reach out to them directly with that registration information, just because it takes an extra registration step. Those who are familiar with YQCA and the platform, the class is already posted on the website, and so they can go ahead and enroll in the class. But if they aren't sure, we'll send out more details as the event approaches to make sure everyone gets signed up for that additional training who would like to stay and attend.
And one thing that is a little different than last year, location, and where is this taking place?
This event will be hosted in the new Bilbrey Family Event Center. And so it's one of the first events that's going to be hosted there. And so we're really excited to welcome families to this new facility that we have on campus.
That was K-State Extension Assistant and Youth Livestock Program Coordinator Lexie Hayes. In today's show notes on agtoday.net, I will put a link if you would like to get registered for the K-State Junior Beef Producer Day. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.